Well, well. Jack Sparrow, isn't it?
Captain Jack Sparrow, if you please, sir.
Well, I don't see your ship. Captain?
I'm in the market, as it were.
He said he'd come to commandeer one.
Told you he was telling the truth. These are his, sir.
No additional shot nor powder. A compass that doesn't point north. And I half expected it to be made of wood. You are without doubt the worst pirate I've ever heard of.
But you have heard of me.
All right, hey, welcome guys to a new series that I'm starting called Budget Builds. Now, clearly this series is designed to have some Lorcana decks that you can make cheap on the dollar. And so this first one I'm looking forward to showcasing is Pirate Locations, which I've played for for at least about 6 to 9 months. I really enjoy this build. It's been one of my favorite pet decks and will only get you as far as, for the current where the card pricing is at, around $33. So let's dive in, kind of see where we're going to be heading. You guys know me. We love roadmaps here. We are big fans of outlines. And so we'll start off with an introduction, kind of give a primer on why would you choose green steel pirates. Now I know that technical and proper terminology here is going to be emerald steel pirates for the sake of the ease of saying green steel, and just kind of just rolls off the tongue. I'm going to be calling it green steel for the remainder of the video, but just know that it is emerald steel. We'll talk about some of the feature cards in the deck list, and we'll do some, highlights of some other tech cards that you can consider for the build that will not be in the main build, but will be at least mentioned. We will of course cover the deck list, go into what would those tech slots look like, and by tech slots, tech meaning special cards that you would fit in or swap out into your deck to help you with certain matchups or to change the play style, to help address maybe how your local card scene plays or people that you're playing online. And then we'll go into what some mulligan strategies might look like. Mulligan meaning that mechanic in the game where you, what in Lorcana it's technically called like sculpting of the hand. Mulligan's like an old Magic the Gathering term. But it's this idea that you can discard your hand or certain cards from your hand and then redraw certain cards. So essentially setting up your first turn for the most success. And what does that look like in this deck? And then certain play line examples on how to navigate a winning strategy while on the play or on the draw. So as far as introduction for green steel pirates, pirates is an interesting archetype in Lorcana because there's been a lot of attempts for pirates to function in many different colors. Probably the farthest color back where Ravensburger really tried to make pirates a thing was a lot of red steel, a lot of ruby steel. There were locations like the Jolly Roger, which allowed pirates to move there for free and then gives them rush. There's a lot of pirates have always been in steel. I think steel has been a major part of their identity, right? Like one of the there's a lot of Captain Hooks in steel, from his 1-drop to his 5-drop, right? And then there's thematically there's cards like Fire the Cannons, and then there's a lot of the crewmates for Captain Hook, like Starkey and stuff, which have and then Mr. Smee, which have all been in steel. And in set 6, Azurite Sea, they released a whole bunch of new pirate cards. They actually made a starter deck, which was Ruby Amber, red yellow, which was very interesting for a pirate color combination. They had people like Jim Hawkins, Pirate Lord, or something along those terms. He's not technically a pirate, he's a hero, but he's thematically he's hanging out with the pirates. They had a lot of the Winnie the Pooh characters as pirates. This was kind of like a smear on sort of the pirate history in Disney Lorcana, because none of this is really carried forward, right? Like after the starter deck, and even within the set itself, there was almost no support for Ruby Amber pirates, and really going forward at all. There was a lot of really cool Ruby cards, like Mickey Mouse got a really strong Pirate Floodborn card, and Aladdin got a really cool Ruby pirate card. But all of the support from set 7 onward was essentially almost exclusively Emerald Steel or Green Steel, and many of them combo, dual ink, being pirates, as you can see here with like Pete Space Pirate, one of the strongest Floodborns in the Green Steel pirate archetype. And so the cool thing about Green Steel is that they continued to get support and still continue to get pretty good support for for the pirate theme, right? And so that's one thing to kind of lean into the strength of this deck, is that there is a lot of strong tribal support for pirates, at least in the Green Steel archetype. And there's a lot there to make multiple functional decks. You can go like action oriented or location oriented, but this build is obviously designated more for locations. Now, the other cool thing about locations is that they're very poorly teched against. Now, again, that terminology teched is that people are like, in regards, how are people prepping their decks to deal with that certain strategy or card, right? So there's like cards that banish locations or that ink locations that, help to deal with locations in general. But they're very uncommonly played in most decks, especially most competitive decks. And so if you are utilizing locations effectively, it's just going to throw a pretty big wrench in your opponent's strategy on how they have to deal with it, which is almost all the time just going to be challenging it. And so, locations just don't feel great to challenge into, and they usually have pretty large willpowers. So, locations gain the advantage of both surprise, but also like people being unprepared to deal with them. There's actually a surprisingly good amount of draw engines in the Green Steel Pirate archetypes, and they have really awesome strong shift lines, and it's just a different way to play. I really like the play style that Location Pirates offers. There's really not many other decks that can do what they do as well as they do, and do it as as smooth and as fun as they do. So, and as thematically as they do, right? So going in, we're going to start with some feature cards, right? Highlighting what are some of the cards that you will see and are most likely to see in builds like this, right? So Captain Hook, right? The OG big top dog pirate himself. He's got a lot of different cards in this deck. And but the best one and most consistent one is probably his 1-drop Captain Hook Forceful Duelist. This is just a really strong 1-drop. He puts a lot of pressure on the board. He has Challenger +2, which, I mean, really, he's kind of the only 1-drop that has that. He's been one of the strongest 1-drops since set 1. He has 2 willpower, so he survives things like Tinkerbell and can trade into a lot of things and survive, right? And he just puts a lot of good pressure on the board as early as turn 1. And of course, he's a pirate and a captain. Another relevant 1-drop that you'll see is Happy, right? So we are going to see 7 Dwarfs Mine in this build and Doc Bold Knight. And so Happy Lively Knight, he gives you an evasive option, which is actually pretty relevant in the current meta. There's a lot of people playing evasives. And so having the ability to hit evasives is good. And then also he can offer a Knight trigger for the 7 Dwarfs Mines. We'll talk about that more a little bit later, but that allows you to move to 7 Dwarfs Mines and then ping 2 damage on an opposing character, which puts a lot of good pressure on the board and doesn't use anything from your hand, right? It's all from the ink. Mr. Shmee, he's just a generically decent 2-drop, right? He's not too strong, he's not weak. He is pirate, right? So he gives you that pirate consistency, and then he can hit evasives as well, which is always helpful. We have Goofy here, right? So set for adventure. Now, Goofy is pretty cool in that he was introduced in set 9 Fabled, and when you move him to a location, he can bring a friend along with him. And if you do that, right, one, you're moving that other character for free, no cost to move to a location, and then you get to draw a card as well. So he's just a really cool setup card that allows for some pretty fancy plays. Doc is one of going to be your strongest draw engines in the build, right? You play him, you discard your hand, you draw 2. But if you play him with an empty hand, you just get to draw 2 cards for free, right? Which is where he's best played when you use your last card in your hand. He also gives that Knight synergy for making 7 Dwarfs Mine stronger. We have this 3-drop Captain Hook. He's just a generically good 3-drop, right? And so the focus of the build in general is to apply strong and consistent lore pressure. So having characters that quest for 2, because there's really not too many of them in the build, is actually pretty valuable. And he's one that, like, if they challenge into him, you're drawing cards, right? So he has 4 willpower, is awkward to deal with. He has Captain Pirate, and then he, you're drawing cards while they're trying to get rid of him. And then Pete is going to be one of your strongest 3-drops. He stops any sort of action response to your board. He kind of freezes the board, and then he sets up for your shift line. Now, the kind of continuing on, going up the ink ladder, we have probably the heart and soul of the deck, which is going to be John Silver, Greedy Treasure Seeker, and Daisy Duck, Pirate Captain. These are really, if John Silver is the soul of the deck, right, Daisy Duck is the beating heart that allows the body to continue and harbor that soul. So, John Silver is just one of the coolest cards in the game. I really like John Silver. For every location that you have in play, you gain resist 1 and 1 lore, which that can get really out of hand very fast, right? And so, John Silver can, in a single turn, go from questing for 1 to questing for 4, and he's extremely hard to get rid of, right? Because he's resist 1 to 4 or whatever, depending on how many locations you have. Outside of like inking him with like a Hades or maybe an Into the Unknown, or sending him back to the hand with like some emerald removal, just dealing with him with Challenger or even like with actions is actually extremely hard. And so he really changes a lot of math in the build for opponents, and he can close out a game very quickly. John Silver Ship's Cook, right? He's more pirate and captain theming. He's just a generically good 3 cost, and he allows you to kind of help close the game by preventing someone from challenging, giving someone else an extra quest. Daisy Duck is your primary draw engine. Doc is one of your Doc is your other primary draw engine, right? But Daisy Duck is the one that like continues to draw cards, and she's the one where you try to you're going to need to do some setup, right? Her ability is whenever a pirate quests at a location, you draw a card. And that is really good. So a lot of the deck is kind of designed to kind of stay cheap, low to the ground, get your pirates into locations, and then as you're questing with them, you're refilling your hand and you're just going again, right? So then we have our shift lines here. Captain Hook, Pirate King. He's really kind of meant to like punish early greedy boards that they're like, oh, they see a 1-drop Captain Hook, like I'm not scared of that Captain Hook, and then you shift this 4/5 Pirate King, and you take him out, and then he boosts all your other pirates if someone's damaged, and gives them all +2 strength and resist 2. So there's, you can ping someone with the 7 Dwarfs Mine, you can hit someone with like John Silver, who's got 1,000,000 resist, and then suddenly like all your pirates have resist. So that's something really cool that he can offer. Pete, Space Pirate, is just a very oppressive 6-drop, right? He can shift on 4, so you can play Pete, and if you played Pete, there's usually almost nothing they can do about that because he prevents actions. And then you could shift Pete, you could then sing something, you could quest for 2, and while he's exerted, your opponent cannot exert characters to sing. They have to hard cast, they have to pay up in raw ponies for those songs, right? Which makes, building their board or like contesting your board very clunky. And he gives, while exerted, all pirate characters resist 1. So he's a 5/5 quest for 2, so like he has to be addressed soon, right? So this is an extremely strong card that can be pulled out as early as like turn 4, and then has resist really good. Like he protects your Daisy Ducks, he protects your John Silvers, etc. So here's kind of the fun gimmick of the deck, right? We have our locations. So there's kind of a decent spread. We have you have the Hidden Cove, which is a 1-drop. We have the 2-drops and the 3-drops. So Perilous Maze and Galactic Council Chamber, they're really just the big, beefy locations that gain lore and are obnoxious to deal with, right? And so they have abilities. Perilous Maze, if a character is challenged there, then your opponent discards a card. If a Galactic Council Chamber, if there's an alien or robot character there, then the location can't be challenged, which is relevant because John Silver himself is an alien. Which means if John Silver is there and he's questing and he's gaining resist and gaining lore for every location, they can't get rid of this location while he's still there, right? So they have to deal with him first, which makes things clunky because it's giving him resist. So it's kind of cool synergy. I'd say in most games, the abilities of these locations is not very relevant. I'd say the ones that are very relevant is Hidden Cove, right? Where the character that is there gets +1 strength and +1 willpower, which can be very, very strong and completely help swing a board and make getting rid of characters very clunky. And then 7 Dwarf's Mine, which is one of your best removal tools outside of challenging. So the first time you move to that location, so it costs 2, it's a little expensive, you deal 1 damage to a character. But if it's a knight, like Happy Lively Knight or Dark Bold Knight, then you can deal 2 damage. And that can really help force hard decisions from your opponent, or like start dealing with your opponent's board while you can keep questing. Castle Wyvern is one of my favorite new cards in Whispers in the Well, set 10 of Disney Lorcana. It's just a really well statted location. It's got 5 willpower. It gives you lore. It's a 2 ink. It's inkable. It only takes 1 to move there. And while a character is there, they gain resist 1 and challenger 1. And that resist 1 persists into your opponent's turn. So it just makes everything hard to deal with, right? And then allows a lot of your characters to kind of like trade up. So like, it's that Mr. Shmee who was swinging, he's 3/2 hits evasive. Let's say they have a genie who's a 2/4 quest for 2 and has evasive. So, they're like, oh, yeah, I'm not scared of that Shmee, right? He can't even banish genie, and he would be banished in the process. Well, Mr. Shmee, now suddenly if you move him to Castle Wyvern, he's hitting for 4, and he has resist 1, so he survives that trade, and that completely changes the math, right? So Castle Wyvern can make some really cool plays. And then Illuminary Tunnels is one of those like really cool snowball-y locations. I'm still not quite 100% dead certain that it's like actually required in the build or really necessary, but it's so good at closing a game and snowballing a game, and it just has such cool location, kind of a thematic element that fleshes out the build. So we're of course going to test it. It's one of the new cards in Whispers of the Well as well. While a character is there, this location gains 1 more lore for every location that you have in play, which can be very, very strong, right? You have 4 of the locations. This location is getting you 5 lore at the beginning of every turn. The more powerful effect, in my opinion, is that, while you have a character there, all future locations cost 1 ink less. And, that becomes very relevant when you're trying to flood the board with locations to quest out with a John Silver, and also just squeaking out and optimizing your low ink counts. So this is the deck list, right? You can look up my Dreamborn account, which should be in the YouTube description if you want to kind of like find the Dreamborn link to look for changes, or if you just kind of like want to copy it from there. But this is kind of just showcasing it in its rawest form. So we have a pretty good spread. We're running about 16 locations, which might be a little high. You could probably squeeze that down to like anywhere between like 12 to 14. 16 kind of guarantees that you'll find it when you want it, right? To really kind of boost John Silver. So the obvious things that John Silver were, of course, running 4 of. Same thing with Daisy Duck. But kind of past them, it's a lot of like 3 of, 2 of, because the deck is less about a very consistent single line, and line being a line of play, right? So it's not that like your 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 turn, right? Your turn 1, turn 2, turn 3, turn 4, turn 5 is kind of like you're aiming to have the same thing every time. The deck really leans into its impressive variety and flexibility to perform well, and just being unpredictable, and then having multiple ways to address problems presented to you. So I think that's one of its best strengths. And so the counts kind of reflect that. 3 Happies, 3 Goofies, 3 Docs, 3 Shmees. Just 2 to 3 of the shift lines, and then all the locations flex between 2 and 4, right? So again, Captain Hook, strong 1-drop, gives us opening to a shift line. Happy, strong 1-drop, gives us the ability to hit evasives. Goofy gives us a lot of really cool, interesting lines in regards to, moving characters to locations efficiently and drawing cards off that, right? Mr. Shmee is just a good kind of 2-drop that pressures evasives. Captain Hook is a good quester. Donald Duck, we kind of skipped over Donald Duck previously. I kind of just like forgot to really mention him. Oftentimes, I'd say in most games, Donald Duck kind of ends up being ink. But he's still here as a 2 of 1. He's a pirate, which is very relevant. But 2, his ability is that while you have a captain in play, this character gets +2 lore. So suddenly this 3-drop goes from a 2/3/1 quester to a 2/3/3 quester. And it's actually very easy to, there's a lot of captains in here. John Silver's a captain, Captain Hook is a captain, both his 1-drop, his 4-drop, or all his 1-drop, his 3-drop, and his 5-drop. Daisy Duck is a captain, right? So, one could argue that most of the deck are captains. And so, you're almost guaranteed to get his 3 lore. And so he can help close games. I'd say most times, you're spending a lot of the game kind of setting up other things, and so if he arrives later, that's great. Or if you're already kind of questing fast and you want to just use him to help close the game, then that's great as well. That's kind of why he's there. He's good enough to stay in the build. He's not quite good enough to stay higher than like 2. John Silver's a 4 of, right? He's going to be one of your main win conditions. There's you keep him at 4. The John Silver 3-drop, right? He helps kind of like make turns awkward for your opponent. I think 2 is the right number. Pete can maybe be 3, right? I kind of like him at 4. He just makes he's a really good on the draw play, and having access to kind of stopping your opponent's options and then the shift line I think is pretty strong. Of course, 4 Daisy Duck, she's your main draw engine. She's the heart of the deck, right? And then your shift lines, which can be anywhere between like 2 ofs or 3 ofs, or really you could argue running none as well and staying lower to the ground. But I really like having access to them. Your main removal tool outside of challenges and dwarf mines is going to be strength, right? Just because it's efficient. We want to keep laying bodies, laying locations while we're dealing with the opponent. And so, actions I did not opt for in this build. But there's a completely different way to play Green Steel Pirates with actions. As for the locations, right? And so, we're running 2 of the Hidden Cove. I used to run 3. I think I kept seeing it more often than I wanted to. I'd say 3 is not a bad call, but I think you should run minimum of 2. Castle Wyvern, this could easily be 3. And with how much I've enjoyed it, there's many times I want to bump it to 3. But, Castle Wyvern really is more of like a strategic card that you want to kind of actually use its ability. It's less for that awkward lore pressure. So the cards that are meant for lore pressure are actually kind of higher counts because that's their main purpose, right? You only really need 1 Wyvern, but you kind of want multiples of the others. So let's talk about tech slots, right? What are some things that you can consider swapping to improve your build and kind of increase, your ability to deal with, other things, right? So first is the 1-drops, right? If you don't really care about evasives or you have other answers for evasives, right? You could swap in Pete, Pirate Scoundrel, who when you play actions that are not songs, right, you could then pop items, right? This gives you another shift line for your 6-drop Pete. If you want to use his ability to pop items, you will have to put in more actions. So things like fire the cannons, or maybe even draw cards like Desperate Plan, etc. And so you have to change other parts of the build to really accommodate and optimize him. But even just as a generic 1-drop as a shift target, he's not bad. I do think personally Captain Hook and Happy are better, but that's just me. Other things you can do is for early pressure, right? So you could put in some Fire the Cannons and just focus your early game on kind of slowing down your opponent or disrupting your opponent. This does 2 damage. It's an action that deals 2 damage to a chosen character, right? Just deals with something. It is what it is. You can also consider using Dump Truck. This is a 1-cost character, uninkable, but on play, you do 1 damage. Now, 1 damage seems pretty irrelevant, but there's actually a lot of early game characters that do 1 damage, or that have 1 willpower, right? You have Diablo, you have Mulan, you have Cursed Merfolk, you have Fred. These are all characters that you very well could see that Dump Truck just deals with. And then the other thing is that he could also set up your shift Captain Hook. By playing him, you ping someone for damage, and then all of your pirates get resist and strength through your Captain Hook. So that's some cool stuff that you could consider. Your 2-drops, right? If you want to kind of shift some of your 2-drops to be more, to apply more pressure, right? You can consider tossing in Scrooges. Now, Scrooge is an interesting card because he helps kind of filter through the deck, right? When you play him, you can draw a card, then discard a card. And then, he quests for 2. The cool thing about him is that when he's challenged, the challenge doesn't finish and he just goes back to the hand, right? He never actually takes damage. So he's kind of like an eternal 2 lore body, which is pretty neat and allows you to maintain quest pressure. And sort of, a kind of healthy hand, I suppose. He does hurt in the fact that he's not, he's uninkable, which the deck struggles to have too much of those. And then the other thing is that he doesn't have any, pirate synergy, alien synergy, captain synergy, or knight synergy, right? He's just, you're using him for his ability and his lore. So, take that for what you will. Another character you can consider is Flint, right? Nathaniel Flint, who can only be played if an opponent's character was damaged this turn. So having the prerequisite does make him clunky. He's a 2-cost, but he's not actually a 2-cost character. It's almost impossible to play him on 2-cost unless your opponent was foolish enough to turn their 1-cost character and quest with them. right? Which is very rare that it happens. If you played a 1 cost as well, then your 1 cost would have to hit them. You did damage, then you can play Nathaniel Flint. Otherwise, you're playing him maybe on 3 ink. Maybe you play Dump Truck and then you play him. Maybe you played Fire the Cannons, then you play him. Maybe you challenged, or you play him later in the game when there's just a whole bunch of stuff going on. You still have to pay his full ink cost. So for our 3 drops, right, again, this is kind of your questing range, right? These are designed to apply pressure in some way, right? John Silver, he fights for the board and he disrupts your opponent's plans by preventing someone from challenging. Captain Hook, right, he quests for 2. If he's challenged, you're drawing cards. And then Donald, if you have captains, he's questing for 3. One thing you consider is Billy Bones. Billy Bones is a 2/2. He quests for 2. He's also a pirate. He's also an alien. And then when he's banished, you banish an item or location, right? So you get some value when he's taken off the board. And if you have a lot of things like Emerald Chromicons or Amethyst Chromicons or other locations that are causing you trouble, Billy Bones is a good way to deal with that. They can't ignore him forever. He quests for 2, right? So they're going to have to deal with him at some point. And then you get to get rid of an item or location for that. Other things you could consider in the kind of upper end of the deck, right? So you could do the Floodborn Mr. Shmee. He's a commonly very overlooked character, but he's actually pretty cool, right? So he's got kind of like a weird stat line. He's 3/6, which is a little clunky. But he quests for 2. He shifts on 4. And shifting for, if I haven't clarified this, I apologize, but for people newer to the game, so shifting is that you can take a character with the same name as a character that's lower cost, and then at the price of the shift cost, right, so he's a 6 cost character, but if you have a Mr. Shmee already on board, you can shift him, so you can play this Mr. Shmee on top of the other Mr. Shmee. Now the Mr. Shmee character is the 6 cost, the 2 cost is now gone, it's underneath the 6 cost. And then, the turn you shift, you can sing, you can, if you shift on a readied character, right, or a dry character, and they could quest in a challenge, then the shift character can do the same thing. So when he's played, right, you can deal damage to a character depending and equal to the number of pirates on your board, right? So you could play him and just kind of get rid of it. You just delete somebody, which is pretty cool, right? So he's kind of like a soft pirate Hades. If you have enough characters on board. You could do something like John Silver, right? More shift targets. So he shifts on 5. He's an 8 cost, resist 2, and every turn, the beginning of your turn, you deal 1 damage to opponent readied characters, right? So it kind of encourages them to not hide behind readying, right? They have to turn at some point. And then he's just like a massive body, 6/6 quest for 2, resist 2. So again, he's a character that can't really be ignored for long. I'd say in general, he doesn't find his way into the build most often because the 3-drop you kind of don't want to quest on or don't want to shift on. You want to keep the greedy treasure seeker, so then you end up shifting this guy on the ship's cook, which is fine. And then another John Silver Floodborn you could consider, or he's not a Floodborn, he's just a larger body, is a Vengeful Pirate, right? So he's an 8 cost, 6/4 quest for 2. He's got resist 1 as well. The cool thing about him is that the cost of his ability to play, right, is decreased by 2 for every time your opponents were damaged this turn, right? So if you challenge 3 characters and you hit them 3 times, he's now only 2 cost, which is pretty cool. Some location options you could consider. So there's the 1-drop Zootopia headquarters, which came out in set 10, Wisps in the Well. It's just early location pressure. I'd say early location pressure with 4 willpower or less ends up not feeling that great because they're pretty easy to deal with. They do kind of get removed off the board pretty fast. And so I tend to favor characters over early locations, but they are a good option. Other strategic locations you could consider are things like Tropical Rainforest, where this is a 6 willpower quest for 1, or gains 1 lore. It's 3 costs, just like Perilous and Galactic Council Chamber. But, it has a cool ability where opposing damage characters gain Reckless, so it could maybe buy you a little bit of time. I'd say in practice, it actually ends up not being that helpful, just because, well, then if they're Reckless, they just take out the location. And you're like, oh, okay, yeah, I guess you could hit location still. And then, the other, really big... The big mama of locations is Treasure Mountain. 5 cost, uninkable, very expensive location. But 9 willpower and quest for 2, or gains 2 lore at the beginning of your turn. And if you have characters here at the end of your turn, you can deal damage to a chosen character location equal to the number of characters here. So if you have magically were able to get like 5+ characters there, you're dealing 5 damage every turn, just getting rid of stuff, which is pretty cool. And with Goofy, right, you can move characters for free. It's actually is more achievable than it's ever been. It's not in the main build just because, being uninkable is a little clunky. But if you wanted to try a build with some treasure mountains, I think it's very achievable. So, and then kind of like the last few cards to consider is the cards like Games Afoot, which is an action that, you can move up to 2 characters to any location for free, and then that location gains resist 2. So right, if you're playing Treasure Mountain, or even just moving things like the mines and such, and then making that location harder to deal with. And then, if you wanted to run like a really interesting pirate action, you could play something like Walk the Plank for some surprise removal, which when you play Walk the Plank, 3-cost action uninkable, all your pirate characters gain Exert, Banish, Damage character. So if you have a opponent that's kind of like been damaged from previous challenges, you could almost wipe a board with this. So it'd be an interesting card as a maybe 1 of, no more than a 2 of. So what's kind of your typical Mulligan strategy for pirates, right? So I would say for pirates, if you're on the play, you want to keep a 1-drop. You can't let them get too ahead of you in lore if you can help it. You want to keep John Silver, that's Greedy Treasure Seeker, right? It's the one that gains resist and lore for every location you have. You want to keep Daisy Duck if you can, so you can play her on turn 5. And then you want to, in the best case scenarios, keep at least 1 location. Even if you end up just keeping characters you can play every turn, like a 1, 2, and 3 cost, that's fine, right? But this is kind of like your dream line, if you can achieve it. On the draw, you typically just want to maintain a good strong curve. And a curve is simply meaning that you're playing a character at the same cost as the amount of ink that you have. So on turn 1, you have 1 ink, you play 1 character. Turn 2, you have 2 ink, you play a 2-cost character, etc., etc. And so you want to have at least up to 3 cost. Ideally, right, you play Pete on 3, which prevents them from singing songs or dealing like your actions against you. And then afterwards, you could sing with Pete with Strength of a Raging Fire, hopefully take out a character of theirs, and then continue putting characters on the board and maybe ending with like Doc or Daisy to draw. Another strong thing you could do is you could play the Shift line after Pete on turn 4. It kind of depends on what they're doing. So let's go over some examples of play lines, right? So if you're on the play, one really cool line you could do is you start off, this is a pretty generically safe line, right? You start off with Captain Hook. You play Mr. Shmee, right? Strong 1 cost, strong 2 cost. You establish your win condition, John Silver. They now immediately know what kind of deck they're dealing with, right? They're going to expect locations, and John Silver has a massive target on his back now. Whenever they see him, they're going to try to get rid of him. From here, you can establish on turn 4 Castle Wyvern. You can then move John Silver and maybe like a Mr. Shmee there if you want to. You should be at 4 ink. You pay 2 to move there. You can pay 1 to move each one. You want to stack as many pirates as you can, which is going to be 2 characters. So I'd probably recommend Shmee and John. Now maybe Shmee's taking out like a genie or something. John Silver is now questing for 2. And at Wyvern, he's got resist 2, even with just 1 location in play, right? So he's now already extremely hard to deal with. And then you have two pirates at your location. So you go and move them on over. You play your Daisy Duck. And while they're at the location, Mr. Shmee, John Silver quests. You draw 2 cards. 1 card per pirate that quested at the location with Daisy Duck. And now you're just back in the game. Your hand is healthy. You have strong characters on board. Start slamming down locations, slamming down more characters, and then close out the game, right? So let's look at another line here. Let's say you don't get those cards in that exact order, right? Let's see if we start out with Happy. You could maybe play a location turn 2, right? Now you are going first, so it's the odds of them dealing with this in an efficient manner is very low. So they're kind of just so 7 Dwarfs Mines probably going to stick around for a while. They have to deal with your characters still, and it's gaining you lore, which is pretty cool. Establish your John Silver, and then turn 4 you can play Goofy. Now with Goofy, again he costs 2, and then you could pay 2 to move him to the 7 Dwarfs Mine, and you can bring along a friend. Maybe John Silver. I'd recommend John Silver, not Happy quite yet, because 7 Dwarfs Mine does say the first time you move a character here, meaning it would count as Goofy moving there, not if you dragged along a knight. So you'd only do 1 damage. You ideally want to keep Happy for a later turn, so that when you move him there, because if he's already at the location, he can't move there. So you want to keep him at a different location or off the location. And then when you move there, you can ping 2 damage, right? So you want to use that strategically. But you can move Goofy, move John Silver, and then, of course, get them on over to Seven Dwarfs Mine, play your Daisy Duck, right? Quest with John Silver, draw a card. Now, notably, Goofy's not a pirate, so if he quests, you're not drawing cards, but that's okay. So let's look at another one, right? So we have Captain Hook. We establish a Seven Dwarfs Mine, get some locations there. We play Pete, and then we surprise them, and we shift Pete, right? Let's say they got cocky. Let's say they tried to deal with your Seven Dwarfs Mine, right? Put some damage on it. And then Pete is now suddenly like taking care of characters. Captain Hook has resist from Pete. And so you can, afterwards, if you establish your Pete on turn 5, right, you can move people to the Seven Dwarfs Mine. Or, right, for like a potential Daisy Duck, maybe you're playing Doc, right? And then you continue on from there. And then Doc could move into the Seven Dwarfs Mine. So there's a lot of different ways you could set up the follow-up turn. But yeah, in general, right, like, you're docking. So we have Hook. We have Goofy, right? Play John Silver. So Goofy's kind of not doing anything. You didn't maybe get your best opening line. That's okay. You play Daisy. Now, this is kind of like a super greedy opener, right? Because you're kind of hoping all these characters are surviving. By not playing a location the turn after John Silver, he is pretty vulnerable. He doesn't have his resist. And odds are you're not questing with him because you're afraid he'll get banished. So, but on turn 5, you lay down 2 locations and you have the ability to move almost everyone there, right? And so you can move Goofy, which then can move John, right? Or you can just move Daisy and move John, put them into the Hidden Cove, which only costs 1, or the Castle Wyvern, and then you're questing, you're drawing cards because pirates are questing at locations. So these are all like considerations, lines that you may see, right, and have to consider. So what about on the draw? So ideally, you want to play a strong curve of characters that are threats, right? Play your Captain Hook, play your Mr. Shmee, get your Pete down, shift your Pete, right? Make it very awkward for your opponent. Play Doc, right? And then play John Silver. Establish your win condition at 5 ink with John, and then you're playing Doc to refill your hand. Hopefully you find daisies and locations, and then you're moving on from there. So this is kind of like one of those dream lines. Obviously it kind of depends on what they're doing. Maybe you would have preferred some locations if they're going kind of slow, right? Pete and shift Pete isn't always the best, but this is an extremely strong line that very few decks will have easy answers to and just makes their game plan hard. So another one you may have to consider, you have Captain Hook, you go into Shmee. You can play the Hidden Cove and move them both into the Cove. This allows for some really cool, sneaky plays. So if people are banking on like, oh, let's say they have a character with 2 strength, and they're like, oh, he won't challenge it to me. Captain Hook and Mr. Shmee would be banished in the process. Well, Hidden Cove gives them 1 extra willpower. So now suddenly you can take out characters. Maybe they had characters with 4 willpower and you couldn't deal with that previously because both Shmee and Hook swing for 3. Well, Hidden Cove boosts them to 4, right? Gives them 1 more strength. So Hidden Cove makes for like a really sneaky turn 3. You now have 2 pirates and a location, meaning that you could play Daisy even on turn 4, quest 2 and draw. Or you establish John Silver and you have enough to now move him into the Hidden Cove. And then the turn after that, you're Daisy ducking, you're drawing a whole bunch of cards, your characters are really beefy in the Hidden Cove, and then, from there you're going to go on and try to win the game and close out. So there's a lot of different ways to play the deck. I hope these playline examples kind of show you what the variety and flexibility of the deck looks like and what it can offer. The locations really do introduce a whole strange way that you can play turns. And then as long as you understand the value of John and Daisy Duck, it really introduces like, oh, wow, if I kind of really mix up playing cards, moving them to locations, and then, doing whatever, right? You can really see the fun in the build. So in conclusion, right, pirates and locations have many tools for success. They introduce a fun, different way to play. Cards are cheap, they're easy to access, and the deck has a multitude of play styles to learn, So I think if you can master this deck, you can really kind of grow yourself as a player. And it's just, it's $33, right? It's not hard to make. Get on out there and, you know, sail those 7 seas. Always appreciate you guys watching. And as you know, here on the Malferon channel, may you be blessed. And